you all today, but we don't have them ready. So what I have here is a suggested process for making sure that we track your comments and get them back to you. So I just wanted to spend a couple minutes on this. So what we are planning to do is when we document your comments in a meeting, we will document them directly in the draft. Or if they're in a written comment, a longer written comment, we'll document our response right in that written comment if it's much longer. And then staff will respond to comments by either revising the document and track changes or doing more research. Or if it's something that we feel can't really be addressed, we'll document that too. So we're still responding to all of your comments. If there's kind of a general comment related to the overall scope, we might not be able to respond to that, but we'll document what the comment is, just to, if it's a broad philosophy about where we're heading with the document, we'll keep on track, but we may not be able to have a specific response to that. Once we complete the draft chapters, we want to post them to the website because we want to make them available to other members of the public who want to see them, and then they could email comments to you from us, via us, that you can then review and see, as we go along what the comments are. And then we can discuss those at a future meeting when that chapter is brought back to you. So that's what we're suggesting that we do in terms of documenting comments and wanted your feedback. Roll that up a little bit. Does anybody have any suggestions about a different way, or is this something that's acceptable? Okay, because it is important that we track all the comments and we know, how we're addressing those. So does anyone online, any of the advisory group members have any comments on this? Jeannie or Rose?
No comment.
Great, I can send this out to everybody if you want, just so you have a record of what we're going to do. And then, does anybody have any questions or anything on what we've heard so far? So thank you everybody and Laura for making such thorough comments. I do want to just, before we jump into the review of natural environment, I want to mention that for natural environment and then also the diverse cultures and community character, just yesterday on the diverse cultures chapter, we got a pretty thorough set of comments back from SHPO, that's the State Historic Preservation Office, what we feel like are really good suggestions to make some additions and some changes to this document. So we don't have those ready yet, but I will share those with you because we found very important changes to make it a much more robust, and they were positive in that this is a good direction, but wanting us to broaden the scope of the groups that we talk about. And, I'll share the comments with you. I just haven't had a chance to say that. Yeah, so that was much appreciated. We're actually meeting with them tomorrow to go over those and just to kind of get a better idea of, what they're suggesting. So just to let you know, we'll be working on your comments on that chapter as well as the SHPO comments. And then there were some other agencies, representatives from the Nature Conservancy, the Ecological Restoration Institute, NAU. They all want to comment. They haven't really had a chance. So we sent the draft out to a wide group of technical experts, including, people like the Nature Conservancy, NAU, to ask for initial comments. But just due to schedules, they all haven't had a chance to review it before you got it, but they want to. So those comments will come in and we will share them with you, but we'll also work on making updates appropriately. But it is a matter of time. Everyone's busy. We call them our partner agency advisory group. about 3 weeks to review this, but, you know, realistically, that's, people tried, a lot of people did give us good comments, and that's reflected in your draft, but I just wanted to, you know, let everybody know, and I think we've got some people online. I know I've seen Aaron has joined us as well. One of our committee members. Yeah, so any comments on that, just on kind of the continuing process of getting 10-foot permits? Great. Well, then,
So
Really?
Melissa?
Yes.
Melissa? This is Rose. So did you say that once you get those comments back on whatever, these draft chapters, they're gonna come back to us again to review them
That's right.
again? Okay.
That's right.
So for tonight, given what you just mentioned, what would we be looking for tonight?
I think tonight we would still like to go over the chapters like we did last time and get your comments on what we have now. On what we have, because it's a, you know, both of these are pretty, they're a good initial draft. We did a lot of work on that. with-
Sounds like maybe a little bit more global tonight until a lot of the technical information comes in, and then maybe we talk more technical terms the next time we go over the drafts.
We could, and then to focus on the goals and policy tonight as well, because that really is, you know, what is used going forward for the, you know, land use decisions. How does that sound? And to kind of look at the overall structure, you know, I think that what we have in there in terms of organization and the topics are probably not going to change. All right. Chapter is natural environment, and I'll just, like we did last time, I can start near the top, at the top, and, again, we went through this, and when you had a comment, did you record the meeting?
Yeah.
Can I, sorry to be late. All right.
Oh my goodness.
Jim, you want to?
No, I'm sorry, you did. That's right.
Is this large enough to see?
It's not so big, so.
So the basic introduction, did anyone have any comments on that? Does anybody need a copy? I had a few copies right here. Where else? What did you just do?
There's one of the There's one, that's the neighbor association.
So if you did, I'll take it, you're all. So if you have that. It's the city, like that's.
So did anyone have any comments on the introduction or the needs and issues? This chapter, you know, the needs and issues are really focused around conserving, protecting, and managing in a sustainable way the county's natural environment.
Diana does have notes on hers,
Oh, good.
so we might want to make sure that we.
Yeah, but I wrote too many.
Well, we're gonna take all your notes. We're gonna take all your.
Okay, so I want to know what support adopting practices, what does that mean? And effectively managing a force. That's just something to think about. Because it's all greenwashing as far as I'm.
Okay, say that one more time. Say it just a little bit louder.
Well, it doesn't really say what supporting, and I haven't had lunch today, so my stroke is really hitting it. But it is, there's no doubt there. Support adopting practices to effectively manage. what are we effectively managing for, what are the adopting practices? So they're just things I think we need to think about. And I would like to add a word that says we value the products that are produced from the land. Bless you. Simple enough, then.
As far as your first comment, is it on the first page? Under-
Oh, I'm
You're on the first page with guidance,
Okay,
guidance statement.
Right, so we've already been there?
okay, so right here. I come on in, have a seat.
I think everybody knows what wildlife safety is and all that stuff, but
Okay.
what are the operating practices that effectively manage for? What are we managing for? Public health, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's just, as somebody that's on the land, it just hit me like, this is the same old thing we hear every time. But I really would like to value the products that are produced from the land. That is a value statement.
I'll concur with that. Or just a philosophical, I see the range issues that we've gone through, ability to point out, savory method. We have this grazing on public lands and how that's swung around. You don't graze them, they're gonna go bad. Hockey is probably an example. But I saw also in the logging business, the whole business, and all that. I was a young lawyer, out of law school, so I represented the pulpers, the loggers, and the chippers against the mill and foresters. And we had a meeting about 1985, 4 years in law school, and I made a comment. I said, I wonder how many 100,000 acre fires we're going to be able to withstand.
Speak,
Yeah.
sorry, just getting comments.
Thank you. I was wondering how many 100,000 acre fires we're gonna be able to withstand when they completely cut the logging and pulping and gyppo out of the forest. Because they cleaned up the forest. It was all the stuff was growing together and it became a mess. And back to the Forest Service, we never had 100,000 acre fires in Arizona. Well, we got 3 over 500,000 acre fires. Once they get started, they take off. They got to have mercy on their souls. And somebody says, well, that's the natural environment. Well, it is the natural environment as long as we're willing to withstand devastation of forest fires. And that is one that I think if the logging pulping business was still in operation, meaning something being produced from the land, versus it turned into a liability to the US government, taxpayers, and all citizens, trying to deal with, we got to thin the forest, we got to thin the forest. When is that going to stop? Right now, NAU and another university in the country, they're soliciting comments from people in Verde Valley about the smoke. I'm born and raised down there, and I know what they're talking about. I mean, every year, they're burning stuff up here, these prescribed burns or controlled burns or fires to get the underbrush. Okay, we got to do it for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. When is it going to stop? Because down in Verde, out of Helsinki, they left, living their whole life, moved up to Seattle, so they can't deal with the smoke anymore. And so those are issues that people seem to just block out. Always laws, cutting firewood and get it to some, I'll just say up on the reservation. There's people out there that are older because the kids all left because there are no jobs and they need to eat their homes. Get some of this wood and you're cutting it up versus just building these flash files. Send them up to the reservation and that part of, I don't think we look at stuff more comprehensive versus we just don't want people to cut down a big old ponderosa. Ain't to shock people, those big old ponderosas fall over.
Yeah.
And if you go out towards Happy Jack, you see these massive ponderosas. Even the modern times now, you see them, they're laying down. And the reason is the root structure can't support it, when you have these moisture periods. I don't know, I just look at it, we gotta start thinking about something's coming off the land and producing for a big county, big area, whether it's the forest or whatever. We need to, it's talking too much.
No, let me just pause for a minute because I saw another message that people are having a hard time hearing.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks, Jess, because I think everybody can hear except for maybe a few people. So if any of the advisory group members cannot hear, just let us know. Okay, thanks. Well, so I just want to clarify then, Mike, what you were suggesting then. So are you making a suggestion that this chapter focus somewhat more on, bringing back certain industries versus the process of the forest thinning? I know Jay Smith, our forest restoration director, is here, is online too, if you maybe speaks to that a bit.
But I think the thing, we gotta do it, we haven't done it in 40 years. And so that has to happen anyway, but I'm talking about everything from the cattle being on the range, we've gone through that and beat that to death. And I've been on the other side of cases involving, we should do this. And Supreme Court sit around and said, no, you're dead wrong. Leave the cattle going. The point of my story is that we've got a culture to say that we want to get rid of all this stuff. And one is, paper investors, they had cattle get pushed off the ground, and once they got to the grass was being eaten, the fires wouldn't propagate as fast. The same thing with the pulp and all that stuff that's out there. We don't have a mill to even deal with pulp. Or Don Walter, bless his soul, you guys know him, he was pushing that OSB plant here. And it just seemed like everywhere it went, it was getting bogged down. And I said it was very, very viable. And all the guys were looking at funding that Los Angeles going very well. And they were saying, viable, it's just got to know we can do it and not get shut down. Because if we build it and it gets shut down, like pulp plant was in the sawmill, you're burning money on it. And I think we have a culture here to say, no, we don't want that because we want to preserve the big ponderosa. Well, I like the big ponderosa too. I mean, just say, don't cut down big ponderosas. They're still going to fall down.
So I want to, go ahead, Billy, yes.
Point of clarification for me. So a lot of us like to say this, I think a whole bunch of us would be sure supportive of what Mike is saying big time. One of the things about the comprehensive plan, as far as its application, is all the private land within Coconino County. So much of what we talk about on this landscape scale has to do with all these other agencies and other landowners and managers that have plans, that have processes and things to get this stuff in. The county, though, being supportive of these things on other lands besides private lands is very, very important. And that as a value, we value those things on those properties. But how does it actually get implemented, or is it practical on the private land that we're supposed to be talking about here?
Yeah, that's a really important point, because the county can support that on federal lands, but this plan does apply to just the private lands. So, if we can make those statements, but realistically how it gets used is in those decisions for those land use decisions.
But I want to go one step farther. If the county values the products, timber, pulp, meat, the county has to be involved with us in our fighting the agencies to do something different. We need that support.
You need the industry there as well.
No, not the industry. We need the county there. There's something that is brought to the county by all these industries that have now gone away. The county benefits unbelievably from them. I think the county needs to support those things. So I was just thinking about ways to put little things in here that we value it or whatever, that maybe the county can come alive and get, knowledge. Man, I've got so many things to teach you. It's unbelievable. I mean, that's it. BS.
No, I get it.
Okay, I
I
know
mean, that's all this thing and always.
Go ahead, Jim, and then Laura.
Okay, history lesson. When I first got out of the Navy, came to northern Arizona, Southwest Forest Industries, the ranchers, they all took care of the forest. They all took care of their private land too. That time, Barchi Bar had a lot of private land. They were logging it. They took care of their land. They grazed it, they logged it. At that time, a big project fire wasn't 300 or 500,000 acres, it was 3,000 acres. That was a big fire. That's because the Forest Service and the logging company, they had they had, it set out in their contracts that the logging company would take care of burning the slash or take care of piling the slash, not burning. The Forest Service took care of burning it. The logging company would pile the slash. They maintained the roads that were necessary for the fire crews to get to a fire. And lightning caused most of the fires back in those days. 9 out of 10 of them, according to what they told me. At that time, things were different in the forest. What happened then was things like what happened to this mountain right here. What happened to this mountain was every time the Forest Service put out a contract for thinning or logging on that mountain, the environmental groups would attack them in court and prevent that contract from being fulfilled. That allowed this mountain to grow to the point where we had the Schultz fire. First, we had the radio fire. That was in '77.
Well, 70.
77. I was working for it.
I saw it, yeah.
We sat on the bunkhouse porch and watched the mountain burn, 1977.
Yeah.
Then the Schultz fire. Then all those other fires. We had the tunnel fire and I forget them all. Pipeline fire. Those were all caused because there was a lack of logging and thinning on that mountain. And it was caused by the environmental groups suing the Forest Service and stopping those projects. So then what happened was now we have no industry up there except for the thinning that's going on now that's paid for by the federal government. Very little of those logs are used as commercial timber of any kind. And the reason for that is they don't cut the big trees. They don't get that #1 grade. There's no #1 grade lumber even in existence anymore. This comes out of Canada. Now it's all #2 or less. That's why they can't use it for structural lumber. That's why they had to go and change the laws around and make fir the product that is used for the structural lumber, the beams, that stuff. So, I had another point, and I can't remember what it was. But anyway, what I think is that these guys are right. These guys are right. We need to go into this with valuing not only the land, not only the wildlife, not only the ecosystem, but we need to value the people on the land as well. We need to value what products that land can produce. We need to value the businesses and the people that live on that land, the ranches. These people live out there. I've worked and lived on all these ranches around here. I worked for Billy for 7.5 years. I worked for the Metzgers for quite a bit of time. I worked at Barty Bar. I ran the ranch out here, the walking cane, for several years. We need to value the people on the land as well as the land. This is not all about the ecosystem as minus the people. This is about the people being part of the ecosystem.
So are you then saying we need to amend this value statement? The one that's up here.
Okay. So,
No, I agree with Jim's history lesson. And I think we've kind of moved away from that. And I think the county has to make a statement. So when all the other governmental entities look at doing things, they recognize, the county recognizes the people that are on the land producing something. Food, lumber, pulp, whatever. Because I don't think that statement has gone strong enough. So when somebody comes in to do something, the county tends to get close. There's 10 trucks maybe that haul logs out of Flagstaff.
Yeah.
Maybe 10.
There used to be
Laura
hundreds.
has something to.
Yes, I saw.
Yeah, so, probably not surprised as a meteorologist, I'm not as down on this, the current form of this chapter as you are. But there are several places through here where I thought at the very least, there could be included the references to the working lands that you spoke about last time. And overall, my big question, which is still a question in my mind, because of course we haven't seen the whole thing in additional chapters yet. Initially, I was thinking this was natural environment and natural resources, where we would be discussing natural resource-based economic and community activities, like the working lands, like the industries that have disappeared and are no longer contributing to the economy or employment or in any other way in our county. So the question is there another chapter that has that kind of robust discussion of natural resource-based activities, in which case this can be more about the ecosystems and narrowly focused conservation activities, but with an eye toward managing those sustainably. And then in whatever other chapter it is, then we have these more robust discussions of the industries that used to be here and which of them could viably be brought back and encouraged, and how might the county interact either with agencies or with private commerce to encourage them being reinstated. So I don't know that the place for this discussion is in this chapter. In fact, the basics of it are in another chapter, but if it's nowhere, then maybe this should be natural environment and resources and their sustainability over time.
Next time. So, there is another chapter that, we have tentatively called Resilient Economies and Housing. So that's where the economic piece, of this industry, we would discuss, because we've already heard a lot about tourism. We've heard about, different types of industries that are needed to take on wood products. So that's where we thought that would fit, versus this chapter, which really was intended just to focus on talking about the natural environment. But I think to your point, there needs to be some tie-in to refer, to talk about the land and the people on the land and the products that are being produced, and at least point to the next chapter that would then have a more robust discussion on this site. I just want to mention, somebody is unmuted. If you could mute everybody online so we don't hear the background, please.
It's interesting if I could, this is for a moment, from these comments, this input, is that interesting if I could speak directly about that, this is my reference, that most everybody knows, we try to understand what a land use advocate is, clearly the comprehensive plan and the sheet from that as well. Then along with that, the whole thing is open space, landscape scale conservation, looking at vertically integrated technological variables and factors and doing all these things. And understanding how do you blend economic enterprise and diversity into that so that you can have the rest. It all goes together. You can't have just one national park that goes broke every year because they don't have enough money to do, paint on their beautiful buildings. And at the same time, not go out and just crush those places and make it, just this disaster in a different way. How do you blend all that together and make it holistic from that perspective and vibrant in itself? So I think that a lot of these comments probably are trying to figure out how to navigate that blend that actually makes it all work.
Yes. I think it would be great if we could go back to that time when the money that was used that was necessary to run the forest came from private industry. Not in the form of taxes, but in the form of what they could bring, the capital that they could bring from the products that were produced from the land.
I don't have answers to all your comments right now, except that, we're noting these and we'll work to change this so that we do reference the other, make that clear.
I have a last sentence to say to all of it. One of the things that about open space and landscape scale, conservation and stewardship and all of the other things that are values that when you went through your hearings and all to find out what your values are, there's an interconnectedness that's very difficult to kind of sew together sometimes when the county's responsibilities are literally to the private land, yet the private landowners at scale are integrated to the Arizona State Land Department, the National Forest Service, maybe some BLM, maybe some other things. And without that integration of those things, you actually don't have anything. All of this open space stuff, all this other stuff ends up being so disjointed that it just falls apart for everybody. And that's a very difficult narrative to really kind of go out and be greater than ourselves in order to understand, because it's a big picture thing. But that is a real fact for all of us and all of these large landowners and so on and so forth. But what keeps those things open space, what keeps those things recreation, hunting, all these other things, is this bigger narrative of integration. It's really important.
And I will say, we're working on the land use chapter, which is one of the upcoming chapters for you to review, and putting together some maps just to show that the checkerboard pattern and then the patterns of land use throughout the county. And so you'll see that next time. And I think to Laura's point, you're seeing this chapter by chapter. And these are really good comments, so to remind us of the connectedness between chapters so that we make sure that we're not just looking at this in a silo. I'm going to close this door after. I think there's just some noise coming. Billy, did you want to move on to the rest of this chapter?
Is there anybody on the line who'd like to ask a question?
Is there a committee member
I
online?
see a hand up.
Laura, can we talk later?
I just had a
Laura says-
suggestion as to language potentially to add to it that might help, so.
So Loris is helping us take notes. So just ask that question again.
I wondered if you wanted me to just provide text that might help address all these comments now, or do you want me to just hold on to them later?
Yeah, we'll do that later.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm gonna write my things out, send them to you. Because there is so much in here that is just words, doesn't mean anything.
Well,
I mean, you can put some words in there, but let's make it mean something. I mean, if somebody looked at the land that knows what they're talking about, well, why did they put that in there? So I was managed. I was about to do it till I got yours. I have written a bunch of it, sent you, just because I think you can do better than this. Your planners can do better. Don't try to use greenwashing.
well, we're challenged, it sounds like, to come up with something different then for you. Our next did anyone have any comments on a specific section that we can talk about now? We try to describe in the natural setting where this county is located. Talked about environmentally sensitive features, which is currently something that is described throughout our current comprehensive plan. Describing those and we talked about wildlife. And we talked about the different species that are impacted and threatened and try to bring those, make that clear what we're dealing with on that level. And here is a map that shows, springs, major streams and washes. This map is gonna be updated, our staff is working on it now, but this won't change too much because it does show what we have that's mapped as far as wildlife corridors, bird areas. And that's the kind of information we have at this scale, for this type of map that would go into the plan. So, we do have this data available, to update this map. We talked about vegetation, we talked about the different types of forests, the ponderosa forest, the pinyon juniper forest, the grasslands. You know, we talked about the forest health, and I know that sounds like it's a pretty important issue here, as we all know, with creating situations for wildfires. And we've got our forest restoration director online too, Jay Smith, will talk about some of those efforts that are going forward with the thinning projects. So, you know, we do have a pretty vast county, as we know, it's big with a lot of diverse landscapes. And that's what we're really trying to describe here, in terms of what we have and then what's taking place to try to protect these areas. This map does show vegetation areas. Again, it's being updated by our staff to have more current terminology in the legend. And then we did talk about soils. Soils are important, different types of soils. This chapter did talk a bit about soils and how important it is for wastewater systems, because many parts of our county are dependent on wastewater systems, and you know, depending on where you are, you either have a good soils core system or you've got to have something alternative. We also talked though about different types of sensitive soils, biotrusts that do, you know, apparently are such that they can hold carbon and they stabilize the soil and they create different types of soil nutrients. So it's about stabilizing soil, minimizing dust, creating an environment for plants to grow. And then we can talk about air quality. And the information that we have on air quality is that generally the air quality in the county is good, as opposed to other areas. You know we do have those days where there are fires or where there are other things blowing that do impact our air quality. Air quality is obviously impacted by fires, but also by dust. And then it goes into the goals and policies.
As far as the broad overview visit, climate change seems to be mainstream pretty much in conversation that it's having on scientific research in the agencies and so on and so forth. But largely along with that, it clearly means that things are not static as far as how things should be or the way they have been and so on and so forth. So when you go and write this and you all have your visits, it's clear to be thinking somewhat dynamic in the way you present your ideas about the ecology and so on and so forth, because a great deal of what we've known, maybe a great deal of what we maybe think we know about today, may be very, very different in a very short period of time or some period down the road. I really don't know. But the point is that locking yourself in, this is how we want things to be, this is what we like, and this is, all of a sudden this could be very, very different. I was with these folks the other day talking about the ponderosa pine forest up here on the San Francisco Beach. The ecologist who's been doing the Chimney Springs work for years said, look, this is going to be juniper, Indian juniper. It's already growing back as Indian juniper after we do the fires to restore the ponderosa pine. So, I'm not here to suggest I know anything about it, except that while you guys have visits, to have a real pioneering, comprehensive plan with an award-winning kind of type thing out there, figure out how to be dynamic in some of the language you use when it comes to these things that really we don't have much sense of. Norman.
Yeah, the way I reflected that in here is commenting in a couple of places that the reliance on the use of the word restoration implies restoring to what? to what it looked like in 1800, to what it looked like 9,000 years ago, to what it looked like in 1955. And some of those states may not be achievable 40 years from now or in 2045. So yes, so it's just, I really like Julie's focus on dynamism of the system and the need then for us to be creative, innovative, flexible. And not just focused on, oh, here's our desired condition and it's based on what, forest ecological history tells us it was like in 1750. That may not be achievable today.
Or maybe we don't want it.
Or we don't want it, yeah. But
I will definitely second that word restoration.
Yeah.
It doesn't really exist anymore.
What would be an alternative word?
I use pre-store. So that's me being a little funny, but yes, I use the word pre-store. In other words, what do we want for down 20 years from now? And not what did we have 20 years ago? And anyway, it's a more forward-looking thing. And hold on with both hands because you don't know where it's gonna go.
well, you do talk elsewhere about, you do also use the terms forest health and forest management. And you can, this is super technical and you don't have time to do a dissertation on. But you could at least have a paragraph that acknowledges that we're not necessarily talking about restoration to a specific state. We're talking about managing the system to preserve the values we most want to preserve.
Or like you just said, restoring to health, whatever that is at the time. Functional health, yeah.
Yeah, I can agree with that because, and Louis' comments too,
Could you
what is
repeat
this
that?
gonna look like in 20 years? The population is booming already. It's not gonna be anywhere near the same. It's like 40 years ago, there were, 20,000 people in town when came over to the university? That's what it was when I came here. 35, 40,000 people. Now it's what? Look, it's 180 or something.
The region is 97,000,
97?
Flagstaff region.
Okay.
The city, the city's 78.
Yeah, and the county is 145,000 countywide with all the incorporated areas.
I think it's 25,000 students.
Yeah.
In that.
Yeah, when I went to U of A, which my mother said, you're going to go to U of A, you're not going to Arizona State. Okay, I'm going. It was as big as this whole county was, the population. That's just not very big. And look at it now, it's Lord. And we're talking about private lands, guys, you gotta get in with that.
I'll make a comment, if you really want to make it easier. On the battle ranches, back in the 30s, if you said to cowboy, every time they have that quote, sail, see all this stuff, this Americana that just comes back to life and kind of gets emotional about it. So, my God, can you imagine a cowboy getting on this and going 40, 50 miles across battle ranches? He's got to take a horse, a couple of 3, 4 horses with water, one for himself and also for his horses, to make it across battle ranges. And then his granddad decided we got to put a pipeline system in, we got to get water out of it. There's not even a bird out there because there's no water and it goes dry. And so there's hundreds of miles of pipeline, right? Then you got tank storage. And whether your cattle are out there or not, pipeline system's there. So people run out, we're gonna go hunt out. And they go out babbits and they can go shoot an elk and everything else. We enjoy it. Well, not none, but my buddies are all hunters. And it's a great thing, part of the Arizona culture here. But it wasn't for babbits, for maintaining those pipelines. When they're short on grass, there's not enough for the wildlife. What do babbits do? Cows, you gotta go somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? A few years ago, you were selling some of your cows. Hell, I was getting emotional about that. My God, man, I get sad when I see all these mother cows being put in trucks and hauled off. 1,000 here, 1,000 there before long, it's worth it, right? But yet Babbitt's kept the water system running, paying for it themselves, and making sure everybody's maintained cow tanks for the
This is the guy right here, by the way, that did that.
Cataract pasture, up there was 30,000 acres on the cataract. You got some cow tanks and stuff. If there's no water in those cow tanks, what happens? You cull back before it goes dry because there's something left for the animals, but you take all, there's a lot of grass up there now. There's no water, so all the animals gotta get picked up and moved. Like over exaggerating.
Last Jim, he handled it all.
And this is all state land that's scattered around in these areas. If it wasn't for the pipeline system of that, it's the same land, but that's zero on it. You wouldn't go out and see all the wildlife and animals that go through our little corridors and then migration routes. There would be zero. In the 1930s, they had zero. Your granddad said there was zero out there. What's wrong with these lands? And he very quickly realized there's no water. And you guys built the system, and you keep adding the system, right? You keep adding to the system.
And all these landowners did the same.
They all did it. That's the point. That's what I'm trying to
wildlife, there wasn't any wildlife.
make. That's right.
There wasn't any wildlife either.
And people forget about that when they come to these ideas that get the cattle off the public lands. One of my clients funded that thing, crazy and a representative. But he then realized, made a mistake. Because he didn't realize, like Babbitt's and Metzger's, all these ranches, our team, all of them. If it wasn't for them maintaining the waters, we wouldn't get any water. We wouldn't get any at all. And I think that's a part that I think is important for people to understand that, as far as they say, oh, well, we want this guy to be, we want this guy to be, we want this guy, because we have an ideal in our mind. That ideal right now is what we're looking at, is because the private property owners did all this work. And it's really everywhere. You go out there, nothing also just occurred out in the lands.
If you allow the ranches to disappear, the wildlife will disappear.
Oh, absolutely.
Nobody will maintain the water system. Nobody will maintain the drip tanks, and when they flood out and wash out the dam, they'll be gone. That's a source of water for the wildlife. And at this point, it's the source of water for the wildlife and the cattle. If you take the cattle off of it, you're gonna lose that wildlife. It's gonna be gone. You're gonna have the kind of population of wildlife that occurred here 150 years ago, which was very small.
So with this, just again to reiterate what we said earlier, diversifying these enterprises that Anna first brought up about looking at natural resources, looking at ways that the landowners can integrate a diversity of businesses, because the livestock business is tough and there are ecological things, there are other issues that have to be confronted over the long term. Maintaining that integrity of the private, state, and federal lands is really important, and it's going to be a huge acknowledgement by the county, as Diana was saying earlier, to emphasize that these landowners across Coconino County have those opportunities to figure out how to diversify, how to stay in place and maintain these open spaces and landscape scale viewsheds and all these things that we're just talking about, including agriculture and things. As an example, because of waters and things like that, that may not show up in conversations, but behind the scenes are massive ripple effects for the benefit of all these other things.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing, is
Yeah.
the benefit of the ranchers,
Yeah.
management, the other license
Support all these
ranchers.
other things.
And that's why,
that words that you guys do.
Well, we'll figure it out, then you guys will tell us if we get it right.
that's why going back up here to the value statement, it's important to make that value statement reflect those of us from the private sector. Or have worked in the private sector.
What's interesting about the land use ethic up front was it assigned the responsibility, the obligation, the accountability to the landowner.
Yep.
And so for all the Leopold's writings, when we were talking about land ethic and all these other things, that was the basic principle, was the awareness, the responsibility, obligation, accountability that is assigned to the landowner, which is Coconino County, to understand all those things to work effectively.
Have we thoroughly discombobulated you?
These are
Good stuff.
a little bit, but it's good comments, and I think I should be thinking of, and Morris is
Yeah,
getting notes, and, between all of us,
okay.
we're listening, but did you want to talk about the goals at all and the policies?
I can sort of clear the part in front of the horse before we get their chapters, or are they specific, just in the section, of course, which they are, but I mean, you tell us what you suggest.
Well, these were specific to this chapter. That's how the plan is structured. That's the goals and policies are specific to each chapter topic, if you will.
But no rearrangement in the conversations we've had today or from anything that's coming would influence those goals, and it's really what I'm asking.
Right, well, these were written very specifically, to describe the natural environment. The idea of the resources and the industries, that would be separate chapter. So, there's, and trying to keep it somewhat organized and logical, these were just focused on the natural environment. And yeah, it was heavily focused on restoration and preservation and conservation. So maybe those are some things that we need. It does sound like we need to be more dynamic in our description of what that means. I am hearing that. It would be helpful to us because I don't know that, this will change, but probably we're not going to change our natural landscape. We'll just describe it differently is what I'm hearing. So the goals and policies and how they apply to private land is really what we would like feedback.
Okay, that's logical.
Yes.
So the private landowners are determining how much water, goal number one here. Watersheds. Watershed's not the only thing. We need the pipelines and the wells too. So, yeah, so getting more dynamic about this that's an important thing. We all should look at it.
And one of the maps that might be really interesting to add to the comprehensive plan is one of those platinum maps that every hunter has. Everybody has anymore that shows really all of the water developments and all of the things across Coconino County. That might be an interesting addition to your map collection. I used the word flatland, and there's lots of them, and probably you guys have them as well, but they have all the waters that are maintained by some.
I don't know that I've seen something like that.
So I'm just referring to what they call pardon? Onyx. Is that a company that makes maps too?
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just a lot of these,
Others have them on their phone.
exactly. There's lots of resources for it, but they have it whether they're in the county or in the units, the gates and so on and so forth. Every single one that is out there. And it's just a real, it's layer. It's very, very important for the fabric of everything else you're talking about.
How would that look in a scale, this kind of scale?
I don't know. I mean, really, I'm just suggesting that following up on what Jim was suggesting on knowing those things. And maybe it's just simply appendix that you have somewhere else. I don't know. But it's useful information from perspective, if nothing else.
The waters exist because private property owners. Rarely does the Forest Service, they'll put in like turkey drink tanks and stuff like that, because they're trying to get a population established. There's a rule with some ranchers and stuff.
So is this mostly a surface water map of tanks?
Yeah.
Very surface.
They're drinkers.
Yeah.
Well, on ours, yeah, and on the flat lines and stuff, the drinkers and stuff will all show up, yeah. Sure.
Sometimes those pipelines are much more important than the dirt tanks.
Oh, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
That
In
is,
places where the pipeline,
I gotta do some back work, and it's all because of that pipeline. So all over the wall out there's rails.
We can
that
see
takes us
that's-
back to the people of the land. The importance of the people, those pipelines don't run themselves. You have to play it you have to play that pipeline like a musical instrument. I did it for 7 years, I know. If you get behind on water in one place, it'll run you behind on water everywhere until you catch up. You have a bad leak at black storage, you lose black storage, you lost water for the entire sealed water.
And what I'm hearing what to really call out is the importance of the pipelines and the tanks that the ranchers maintain is really what is, that's the point that I'm carrying.
Even waterfalls.
Yeah, because it's that, I'm thinking that at this scale, a map like that is just gonna be too small. But if we make a call out there that's
Just a
something that
reference.
is, but that is an important
You guys
resource.
just look at it, because you're drafting this and you understand what we're saying.
I mean, the other approach is show an example of what it looks like for some relatively modest local area. But the point you're trying to make is that at the landscape scale, which is what this plan is talking about, you can't ignore virtually the most important or the most frequent or the most abundant sources of surface water, which you're ignoring if you don't mention that they are the creation of private enterprises.
Well, they also have groundwater. They also have groundwater. These guys-
Groundwater in all these places.
Most of them are back.
But it's an active surface, that's what I'm trying to say.
The surface water.
That's exactly.
Back to the point about the goal then, watersheds are bigger, I mean, they're in big drainage areas. And they're just a natural, big basin, if you will, does this goal seem that it is worthy of putting the plan? That watershed, watersheds are separate from pipeline, watersheds are a natural system. But right now, the plan doesn't address watersheds.
Separate goal, maybe just simply a separate goal, because clearly this watershed goal is something that needs to be, we all get that.
Okay.
But maybe a secondary one that really does link into all the other things that we're talking about, includes the surface waters that have been developed and maintained in and around the county.
So Melissa, what are adjacent lands that you're referring to there? What are the adjacent lands? Talk about watershed in Coconino County and what adjacent lands are held in actively function. Where are the adjacent lands? They're not in the county. What are they?
So the watersheds cross county lines. They're not all just within the county, so they're bigger than just geographic and political boundaries, if you will. So, that's what that was trying to refer to. We could take that out, but recognizing that watersheds, they don't pay attention to those boundaries.
Like you call it,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's much bigger than the county, so. And then there were a couple of policies that went with that. Scroll through these and then stop me if you. Comments on it? Is that right? How would you like to proceed?
I think you should just scroll through and let the guidance to be given in her list.
Okay. Okay, and then the second goal, protect the integrity and resiliency of the natural environment with special attention to environmentally sensitive features. That's the current plan. And then policies to go with that.
As you review this chapter and other chapters where we talk about dynamics and all these lists, there are key words that are often used as we're mentioning restoration, a few of these others. Really clear what they mean if you use them. Because a lot of words that really meant something 20 years ago have completely been diluted and don't have that same impact on meaning today. And really understand that lesson on about terminology for moving forward will really make this, as you used earlier, robust, and make this a bit more robust if your terminology is really keyed in on what you need and moving forward.
So really to that, living number goal 2, what words in there would you support or replace?
Well, one thing is, I know about 3 adjectives and I use them over and over again. So that's my first thing.
Okay.
So then the second thing would be is things like integrity.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means in climate change context. Resiliency, fair enough, but resilient, I don't know, what does that really mean? And maybe it means something to some people in this net, but I'm just suggesting that as they go through that, to question their terminology they're using, not just because somebody that has been in forestry their entire life is still using the word restoration.
Yeah.
where the 25-year-old that's coming on forestry is not using that, really understand that you're moving forward with this document, and not looking back. So the terminology, just to do that. Question, I guess. And I will tell you, sustainability is the first word you should have on the whiteboard and ask everybody, what does this mean? I'm not kidding. People assume they know what sustainability means, and that's not true. And anyway, it would be fun. And for your comprehensive plan to really appreciate what sustainability means to you as planners would be cool. Really enjoy it. I put the word up there. What does this actually mean? So that's why I'm bringing it to language.
Okay.
All right.
I'm just gonna continue scrolling to the goals and policies that you all said. Sorry, there's somebody unmuted online. Would you please mute? Just can you go?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Got it.
After there's still somebody. Okay, I am still scrolling through then. I think we're getting back of taking care of. Goal number 3, conserve wildlife that have habitats and movement corridors.
So these, both in 3 and 3, 4, 5, all of those are places where they're set. That's comments about the plant ecologist position could fit in, right? Like you mentioned specifically, continue to support a wildlife planner position that contributes.
Right.
I don't know if you're expecting this group to weigh in on Seth's suggestion about the plant ecologist position, but
Yes.
there are many, these 2 pages, all of them are about questions and need for expertise that a plant ecologist position could contribute to.
So thanks for bringing that up, because that was another set of comments that you got in your email was from Sot Best and the idea of plant ecologist position. I know we've got some people are wildlife planners online. We've talked about that. And there is a strategy that we have in here about reconvening an invasive weed, not an advisory group, but it's a consortium. And instead of a plant ecologist position, because mainly funding and having the actual position at the county is something that may not be the right fit, but convening a consortium of agencies to re-energize that group, and we've got that strategy down below. That seems to be a logical approach, because weeds on private land are addressed either through an initial use permit if they've got a project. So the private land that the county can actually affect is pretty small in comparison to the federal state land. So that was why, and I can let Jessica speak to this a little bit further. Having a plant ecologist position just based in the county is to just work on projects that come up for the permits that we issue. Is going to only impact a very small amount of land, whereas creating that larger group would actually have more of an impact. And the idea would be here, pursue partnerships with agencies and organizations to coordinate and reconvene as the San Francisco Peaks Weed Management Area.
Well, I used to work a lot on invasive plants, so I know how some of these collaborative and partnerships work in different parts of the country. And I think that's a great strategy to pursue here, the reestablishment of that cooperative effort. But I know that the regional plan as those folks have been discussing a shared position between city and county. So it wouldn't necessarily be just the county's role to support it. And secondly, so many of these issues have to do with habitat and management of vegetation more broadly. It's not just, oh, this person has some kind of spurge on their property and we need to convince them to do something about this weed, but there's a lot of vegetation and ecological expertise that these other topics, forest management, grassland maintenance in a changed climate, watershed integrity, where you have a watershed passing through different land ownerships. And ecological expertise could be valuable in lots of these areas and not just the weed management issue. That was my general point. Now, I mean, fly with everybody, but anyway, that's why I was pretty gung-ho about the proposal from that.
Yeah, I think that the weed management has been a pretty big deal to come up over recent years in particular, although there have been people working on it for a long time behind the scenes. And I would like to take the opportunity with that. First off, that race would go right to the NRCS and get somebody that is a specialist in exactly that and come out and do stuff with this. And we've done that for a long time. Then we go to the American Conservation Experience folks over there, they come out and they've got their experts who come out and do the same thing, but they do the work and they get it all done. We stay up with it the best that we can, right? It's very meaningful, important to me as a landowner and to the people I represent that we do that. The key word here is it's important to us. I would ask that the county, as they put this together, and a lot of the stuff on the environment, a lot of the stuff on the wildlife, a lot of it, of other things that direct county or others to do stuff on land, you be careful not to take away the opportunity for the landowner themselves to have the ability to do it themselves. Because like when we did this last thing where the next Terra project, for example, and have to go out and do some more weed management because I would have never done that weed management plan for that project that way, but I wasn't asked. Right? It went through a process, they did it, and they had weeds. I'd have never done that. Anyway, I was talking to the folks from ACE and some others and stuff like that. We would have totally done that differently. But when you take it away from the landowner, a lot of these responsibilities that end up going in here and hiring people to come be the experts and hiring, but you have to be a little bit careful from even a planning and zoning perspective. If you take it away from the landowner as a sense of accountability for it, or responsibility and accountability, you take the land use ethic away also. Because they're regulating it. It's no longer saying, is this a value to you? If it is, where's your responsibility? Where's your accountability? And so on and so forth. Honestly, on balance across our country up there, I want to have the responsibilities of what you have here. I want that responsibility, and I will accept the accountability for it as well. Now, do I need experts, so to speak, experts and people that are asking so? Sure, I do. I also want to know that when we go to do what we do, it's because we believe it's right and good, not just for ourselves, but for the broader community as well. So be careful as you go through these things and know that when you regulate something on land, private land, you're actually taking away the opportunity to embrace the very thing this is founded on, and that's the land use ethic. That ethic drives the values harder than the regulation. And so, but on that weed management, that's, Laura could come over and say, Phil, I didn't talk to you afterwards. Here's the main thing on the weed management deal. You go disturb the land, it's going to grow weeds. They have to stay there for however long it takes to grow the grass. And it may be 2 years, it may be 3 years, it may be 10. You're staying here until it's gone. And that's the bottom line of the weed management program. Now, where there's weeds already existing and all that, I guess that could be a different deal. When it comes to new projects though, and they have to have weed management, you simply have to obligate them for a period of time that they can't just say, hey, look, we revegetated the thing, see you guys, we'll come, there you go. It just has to have some follow through until it's certified, hey, look, this is good to go. And that's really the bottom line of that. So thank you. I hope that was meaningful for you because that's coming from my heart telling you guys. I know the Fosters and the Metzgers, that, you know, for example, I know that the folks out there at Walking King now, some of these other ranches and stuff like that, they truly want to have the obligation to do what it is everybody else is talking about. We set up Diablo Trust, we set up Landsburg Foundation, we set up all these other collaborations, area management plans, all these other things. We want to have that sense of accountability. And so.
I really respect that, but I'm thinking about my Donny Park neighbors,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
They don't understand what's gonna happen when they do some project in the back acre of their
Yeah.
3 acres, and they need
They
some
do.
help, and,
Yeah,
you know,
I
believe
agree.
me, they are not gonna get, you know, ACE to come help them out. So, it's just, you know, I.
Having the field
respect
between
what
the
you
two.
say
Have
about
the field between the
regulation,
two.
But I feel like expertise that would be available to
Yeah.
some of the private landowners who do not operate with,
Yeah,
you know, either the background or the resources that you're able to.
yeah, I agree. I
That's
don't want to take that away.
mindset.
And look, not everybody's going to be responsible and feel a sense of accountability. So I get that, but when you start managing for the 10%, not the others, that's where it kind of is too bad. So anyway, but I agree with what Laura's saying. Generally.
Building on what both of these folks have said. Okay, what Billy said was you gotta wait till the weeds go away and the grass reestablishes itself. When the land is disturbed, the weeds come up. They're the annual weeds. They come up no matter what. And the seeds are in the soil, they're gonna come up. You can't just go out there and chop them down and wipe them out. Weeds are the first stage of grass. Repeat, weeds are the first stage of grass. You gotta have the weeds come up, like Billy said, before the grass will reestablish. Because the weed population protects the small grass population. It allows the grass to reestablish. From natural seeding, you don't have to seed it, it seeds from the ground, they'll come up. But you have to have the right conditions. And the weeds provide those conditions. I was a range manager as well as a ranch manager years ago on the Walking King. That was way before I ever worked for Billy. And that was what I discovered, was that you had to put up with the weeds until you got the grass. And, like in your forest down here, aspen trees come up, oak trees come up after a fire, along with a range of other stuff that doesn't get any higher than this. Aspen trees are the first stage of ponderosa pine. You gotta remember that those kinds of things have to occur before the other things come around. Okay, what's it?
I'll say one thing on number 7 of the comments. That was, according to Jacob, that I'm very sad, I get a call from somebody that in front of your house, you have these invasive species. That's it. Okay. I thought they were wildflowers. And I don't want a Nebraska front yard. And I said, I'm sorry, I pull them up, but I had no idea what I need to pull up. And I said, well, can I go pull them up? Sure. I don't know who the person was calling me, but they lined up somewhere, so obviously must know. Anyway, I go out there, you know, it's a couple days later, and I noticed which ones they pulled up. I honestly thought they were flowers. They're beautiful when they're flowering. I had no idea they're some invasive species. That's neat, you know. And honestly, I probably planted them with Dave Rogers seeds. Buddy Bars, he did a lot of conservation work and stuff, and then here it is, because I told him I don't want Nebraska anymore. And he brought all these flowers, it took about 2 years, and once they got established, every year they pop up and they're beautiful, but I didn't realize one set of them, there's a lot of them, there are dozens of them. But I had no idea, and I think that community involvement is obviously, they have something organized. Because somebody was able to call and say, hey, I didn't mean to get this type of seed on my neighbor or anything else. I thought they were all, you know, native flowers, and that's why you don't need to water them. I like that comment in it with it coordinating.
And so is that something that would need to be wrapped into one of our policies here? Because we did the last one, is about agencies and volunteer groups to control the spread of weeds on parklands and to educate residents about these. That's a big lift.
Yeah,
It is. It's awesome.
I like it.
My wife does it. She goes with a group and they do that stuff. They love it. It's a kind of cool thing.
Oh, maybe that's one Karen's people. Somehow they get old, when I look at it,
It's amazing.
Man, it's gone.
It's a tiger meat too.
Yeah, I know. Weeds are not weeds in some places.
That's right.
Weeds here are not weeds in places, so.
It's a bridal bouquet.
In terms of a goal, does this seem appropriate to everybody? And then the policies, you know, number 9 is about weed management plans, to Billy's point, for new development. And this is where we are requiring a conditional use permit or rezoning, where we have a new development, where they have the ability to, you know, a big project like the, you know, the utility scale renewables, they have the ability to write a plan like that so that there isn't acres, tens of thousands of acres of cheatgrass, which is like, yeah,
Absolutely.
okay,
Just obligated to the long term on that weed management plan.
To the long term.
Solve a whole bunch of it.
yeah. And I'm just gonna, if I could, Jessica, are you online and did you want to add to this conversation at all? Jessica Simmons?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Melissa. I'm so sorry. I wish I could have come in person, but I'm having real trouble hearing a lot of the conversation. But so I might be speaking to things that have already been said. I'm just gonna go ahead and say what I was thinking about the plant ecologist position earlier. So anyway, yeah. So as the wildlife person, I get a lot of questions about plants, even though that's not necessarily my area of expertise. And when plant stuff comes up, a lot of the times I end up dealing with it. And I feel like there just might not be, from the stuff that I do right now, there just doesn't seem to be enough plant stuff that normally at this point comes across my desk to support even a part-time plant person. But an exception would be if the county decided to really go crazy on a weed, on a new weed, you know, control program that we do not have right now. So there'd have to be the will and the funding to do that. And unless something like that changed, at this time, I feel like there's not enough work for a dedicated plant position.
Any questions? So Jessica's our wildlife planner, just so you know. And so she does, you know, review projects in regard to the weed plants, weed management.
What kind of a time line are we looking at? What kind of a schedule of these kinds of things, weed control strategies?
Well, I think it varies project by project, but like Billy was saying, a lot of them are long-term to do inspections and follow-up to make sure that the plants are being, that it's being maintained and monitored.
Okay, because what I found is that if you want to reestablish grass on a piece of country that's been disturbed and the weeds are there, they come up. You disturb that piece of land, the weeds are going to come up. Whether it's fire, whether it's driving across it, whether it's cattle, whatever the deal is. If you disturb that land, the weeds are going to come. The grass is going to come, but it's eventually. It might take 50 years or 100 years for that grass to come back fully like it was. So what kind of a timeline are we looking at here?
Well, yeah, that's, again, it's project by project, and I think that it's got to be at least somewhat realistic in terms of, you know, staffing ability and how long the property owner will be there. But I think that, and these guys can speak to that a little bit more. It's been, how many years out are these weed management plans? Do you remember?
So all commercial, anything that's not a single family residential development, which is
Yeah.
99%, percent of what gets developed in our unincorporated county, which is only 12% of the land mass of our unincorporated county is actually private land. A single family home does not require a weed management plan or a landscape plan. Commercial developments or anything that's basically not single family residential, so you're, institutional uses, commercial uses, things like that. When they develop, they're a commercial building permit and they require a landscape plan. And we have a landscape section in our zoning ordinance that describes what they have to install. It heavily incentivizes low water native plants. It heavily incentivizes, and Bob and I have done work recently to update it to retain native existing plant life on your property. You shouldn't have to go down to the hardware store and spend any money on a new plant. And you shouldn't have to install any irrigation system. But a part of your landscape plan per the zoning ordinance is that you do weed management on your as part of your landscape plan. So that's getting signed off as you wrap up, the construction project on property. You did in fact install the landscaping you said you would, or if you need to, or you retain the landscaping you said you would. So you met the county's landscaping requirement for your non-residential project, and that did include a weed management plan. Now, in theory, long-term, at any point in time that say some commercial property falls out of conformance with what they were supposed to maintain or install for landscaping, or if they fall out of conformance with not managing their weeds, in theory, they could have a code enforcement call on them and be told, like, hey, you're a commercial project. I can look back to 3 years ago or whatever, when you got your building permit, you have a landscape plan. You're supposed to install this landscaping or maintain this landscaping, and you're supposed to manage your weeds. So it's not something, we have a lot of fish to fry. It is not what comes up much. Yeah, definitely not. But we do try to follow through on it. So it's in our zoning ordinance. That for non-residential development, you will do landscape planning and weed management. And it is within our subdivision ordinance as well. That when you first do a new subdivision, that will include landscape plan, and that includes weed management. So as you wrap up the infrastructure on your subdivision, like Walnut Creek Meadows is our more recent one. We don't do a whole lot of subdivisions these days. Johnson Ranches would have been one several years back. That gets checked. All right. Now, y'all are ag exempt on your ranches. So for you don't fall under zoning. The only time you fall under zoning is when you get a conditional use permit for a renewable energy project. And then there's a condition in there. And I hear you completely on, and we try to go with the performance standard of, hey, if you come up with a plan, and typically one of our local environmental firms gets hired to do that. You come up with a plan and you report back to us. Because we don't prescribe what your weed management plan should be. That needs to come from the environmental consultant that you hire. Nor do we anticipate that the county would at any point get very prescriptive on how to do a weed management plan. We don't have a pass for that. And the vast majority of the scale development we deal with on a regular basis is much smaller than the landscape scale that we deal with on your ranches. And the only time we deal with those is for these renewable energy projects. So that's when we work with it.
Thanks,
We
Jeff.
try to make it performance-based, as opposed to prescriptive.
In Oregon, where my brother lives, they have, the county has a way to handle weeds, and it is that they go around, and if they spot a Canadian thistle standing up there in somebody's cow pasture, you get a letter that says you will remove those noxious weeds, or you will be fined.
Just like an HOA. Just like an HOA.
Yes, it is.
What you said about Dorothy Park, all of that relations to this conversation. Did anything new come up?
No, I mean, his comment about residential, is a helpful
Yeah.
reminder to me, but no, I've heard of what you said.
I want to remember to speak up a little bit.
And respect it, yeah.
So then in regards to Sawfest comments on the planning ecologist and what we're suggesting here about the San Francisco Peaks Weed Management Area reconvening that, does that seem like a balance?
We think it's proactive on weed management since good, and we're not really closely staffed. I was kind of spitting on Forest Service land is up to you, I guess. I mean.
Well, it's, that would be not just the county doing that, that would be.
Yeah.
The next goal, promote healthy forests by restoring the forest ecosystem.
Education would be very handy on weed management, right? See, so what
Yeah.
we're saying is what you just said, that education component of the value associated with not having weeds would be very important in county concerns.
So maybe that education piece is real and more effective way to approach that. Okay, well, I do want to move on to the rest of these, scroll through the rest of these goals, okay? How does this goal promote healthy forests by restoring forest ecosystems? Residents. And then the policies, again, working with public and private partners to continue implementation of the forest restoration initiative. County has a big forest restoration initiative that is ongoing. And this is something that is not going to end. If anything, it's going to continue and get more attention. And Jay Smith, I think, is still with us to speak to that if you have questions. Jay, did you want to add anything to that?
I think I would ask you what is.
I mean, I'll listen to everybody's comments,
I'm sorry,
but I
what's
know.
that?
Oh,
you guys
sorry,
hear me?
for
Sorry,
Jay
Forrest
Smith.
J. Forrest J.
Yeah.
Sorry, Forrest J.
Too many J's. I mean, I'm curious to hear what everybody wants to comment on that, but going back to this brings in that whole forest restoration, the word restoration, and I think we'll add a definition on that because basically forest restoration is a process that helps a degraded ecosystem recover. That is a real basic definition of taking something that's in an unhealthy state and trying to bring it to a healthy state. We're not trying to define what time period or just that it's to a healthier state. But beyond that, just here to listen to your comments so been taking a lot of notes.
Thanks.
Sure, that's fair enough on that word restoration, but you have to appreciate most of us that have been in this country for a long, long time, that definition for restoration was not that definition. So, I mean, you're using the same word and suggesting there's a new definition for it. So that's, could be confusion.
Yep, totally understand. And that's why we'll either add a definition to the page so that everybody knows what that means, or we'll work out some other wording.
Going back to the goal then, so we can see, sorry. So right there, that word, we'll look at a different way of describing that.
Just take it out.
Take it out, okay. Yeah, we'll need to find a way to describe it, a way to, a word to replace it with potentially, that it carries still what we understand that to be. Let's be the same to restore a degraded system, but that also fits with this more dynamic discussion that we're. So any suggestions you have, please feel free.
The word was sitting really well, really, just, was talking just about healthy forests, whatever that may be. And healthy forests too. I mean, I don't want to read say that wrong.
Sounded like Jay is thinking about that. Functional ecosystems, functional.
Words matter, thanks. There are a lot of policies that go with it, and then the next goal is about soil resources are protected and soil conservation practices are improved. Again, we revised, it's something that we have currently in the plan. Understand that soil is important, topsoil is important. We have very little here. Protecting it from this drying out and blowing away is something that we've all seen. So that seemed to be an appropriate goal in the plan. And then there's one more after this about air quality, and then we can decide if we.
I actually want to go back to policy 14, which is at the top of that page, and it's about the fuel reduction and encouraging property owners, blah, blah, blah. And I wondered if, isn't it the county that runs the voucher program with the landfill? So I wondered if that's another implementation strategy that the county should continue and potentially expand the voucher program to incentivize landowners to. Look like you've never heard of this, but out in the county.
No, I
We
know
get a
about
voucher in the mail and it encourages you, if you're too cheap to pay your $20 to go to the landfill with your pickup truck full of leaves or tree thinnings or whatever from your property. There's a week every year where you can go with this voucher and go in for free and dump your stuff. So, anyway, I know people around Donny and Timberline and so forth, they're like trading those things, bartering them for everything bucks. You know? So anyway, it just seems like something the county's already doing that you could refer to and could potentially be managed in a bigger way or a different way or something.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think we did talk about that in our sustainability chapter because that program is still operating, the voucher program.
Yes, it does.
So yeah, I think we can make that connection between the two because that is another way to, using that voucher program helps people not just for fuel reduction, clearing yard waste, but and other ways too.
And Mike, what is the program to McCullough's and right now through the NRCS and those trees down, do all that stuff on right over here?
You just mentioned today,
There's no program, NRCS will pay any private owner to clean those trees off and don't pay you to do it. Off the private.
NRCS will do that.
It's absolutely fantastic. So he's cutting the trees down, he's being paid to do it, and then,
Is it just for certain, for ranches or?
no, shoot, no, this is in town, his property just right here off Schultz Pass Road. And he's cutting the trees down and bucks it up, puts it on the road, anybody that wants the firewood comes takes it. They go out there and they mark the trees that he's supposed to cut.
that's right, he said they cut it, put the firewood along the road.
Yep, and they pay him to do it.
Okay, we'll have to have a good. The last.
He did say that NRCS.
The last goal in this chapter then was about soils resources, and soil resources are protected as soil conservation practices are improved. How does that, any comments on that goal? Or the policies that go with it? So the policy 17 is about the review process for subdivision and development programs, consider mitigation measures for drainage, erosion, sedimentation and related issues with regard to soil type and slope issues. And then number 18, conserve topsoil construction and implement best management practices to prevent erosion. So really it's focused on preventing erosion and conserving topsoil where that's possible. So that was it for this chapter. Billy, did you want to time and determine if you want to break, did you want to try and review the second chapter?
Well, there'll only be 20 minutes left, right? So to do anything material, what would that one thing be besides the break?
It's up to you, as you know, as a group, we could.
We don't review the next chapter. Are we able to logistically work all this together still?
We'll have to adjust the schedule, but we can do that. We don't.
Probably just fold into some of the other technical stuff that's going to be coming and maybe we do all that at one time rather than separately.
Yeah, I think though for the next meeting, we had planned on bringing 2 more chapters to you for the next meeting, so we might have to push those out and adjust the schedule. If you want to still review. So the next chapter was diverse cultures and community character. There's a lot in it.
Let me ask if everybody's okay. I think that you might be able to do that in 20 minutes, given your shippo comments that you received, right? And a few other things, you'll be doing some massaging to it anyway. And all that. Maybe you want to just give us a note if that's what everybody else would like to do. But you'd be able to maybe pull that off in 20 minutes?
We can give it a try. We can give it a try.
Give them part of it.
Anybody's gonna break. We're gonna.
Did you want to read? And
Let's
what are we doing?
We're gonna do.
Your first reading of services?
Yeah,
Okay.
so let's jump into that and then, okay, great. Okay, so this chapter is, the natural environment chapter, just to back up a little bit, that is required by our direction by statute. This chapter is something that the county has something similar. We've had a community character chapter. It's not required by statute, but it's something that has been in the plan and it seems important to the community to talk about our community character and then our diversity of our cultures. So I can just go through this again. We talked about the needs and issues when we went out and did the interviews and focus groups. There were several things that really resonated, that diversity and equity is something that is important and it's something that should be further highlighted and brought out in this version of the plan. Wanting to make sure that everyone, that as many county residents are aware and acknowledge the decision-making process and have access to decision-making as well as public services and basic needs. So, and then clearly needing to promote respect and, use formal partnerships with Indigenous nations and other groups. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, please.
These are things that the community told us needed to be brought up more effectively in this plan. So this chapter starts out with design, community design. And so it's got two aspects to it. Really, it's got the community character side of it and then the cultural side, the diverse culture side. So community design, we talk in here about view sheds. We talk about the roadway corridors, historic roads, scenic roads, and those are designations that we recognize. And those are things that are established by the Department of Education. And we want to recognize them in the plan because when projects come along that are on the scenic corridor or in a scenic view shed, we want to make sure that the way they're being developed, if they are an application that needs approval by the commission or the board, that they actually do follow along and they meet the character of that corridor. So there's a map in the chapter right here. And it's, but this does show, and the color again has been washed out on screen, but we do have Arizona historic roads, Arizona scenic roads, national scenic byways, national all-American roads. So these are designations that are either given to these roadways by state or federal processes. But we do recognize them in the plan and the goals and policies address maintaining, visual compatibility with those roads. So they're not taken away when people are driving on them. We talk about natural quiet is important to a lot of people that live in the county, in addition to wildlife, the recreation values. So natural quiet is something that is discussed. And then, of course, dark skies. Dark skies are important for our observatories. People value it, wildlife value it. It's, the nocturnal wildlife, so the dark skies are important. And then we talk about community building. So we kind of, go from the scenic side of things into more community building. And we talk about activity centers. So the idea here is, in this vast county, the different communities appreciate and value their rural lifestyle, but they also want connection. And so we know this. And so as much as the county can provide any kind of support for that, that's what we were talking about to some degree by discussing community building. Activity centers are actually more formal. They're actually designated as certain places. They're like a node, and we have a map that shows where they are. Activity centers can be a concentration of services, of businesses, of post office, like gathering places for different communities. So that's a way to kind of foster that community building. They actually need to be designated on a map, and then if there is a design review overlay in an area plan, then they can actually then, have specific design guidelines applied to them. So we talk about activity centers. And then we start in the next part, talks about cultural, historic, and heritage preservation. What this section refers to are more the historic buildings, the archaeological sites. The county is not a certified local government. That's kind of a formal designation that if there was a position at the county that would have that ability to review historic structures, then we would have a little bit more, I guess, backing to get grant money and things like that. We can still work with SHPO when a project comes up that may have historic value, may have listing on the National Register, has archaeological and cultural value. We still work with the Historic Preservation Office just by being we're not a certified local government, so we can't make that determination ourselves. We work with other. So that's what this talks about. We want to recognize that there's a lot of history, a lot of cultural history in this county, and that preservation of that and protection is important. We talked a bit about traditional cultural properties, and the SHPO office has some comments on this. I guess the Federal Register Bulletin, where I took this language, is being updated. That's a more generic term to describe an area that's important to Indigenous people for cultural practices, for collection of plants. It's not necessarily has a distinct boundary, but it's recognized as a larger property. So this section, SHPO has some comments on needing to update that, but it is something that is recognized. The whole area of the San Francisco Peaks is recognized traditional cultural property. So that was something that seemed to be a good fit for this chapter, because when there's a project that would be on private land within that area, then there's some need to respect and communicate with our Indigenous nations on appropriate development styles. And then the diverse people and cultures, this is where we talk about the different groups that live in the county. Just demographically, we've got a pretty wide mix of indigenous people. We've got Hispanic, Latino, we've got Black and African American, as well as white people and Asian. So there's a mix of people, and this section was making an attempt to recognize that, in addition to our federally recognized nations that have an affiliation with the county, which is something that is pretty significant when you look at this list, recognizing that these nations may not have land here, but they have an affiliation with this place. And then we go into some pretty longer history of habitation, and Bob can speak a little bit to this if you want to jump in, and just some of the a description of people that have lived here for 15,000 years, and wanting to recognize that more prominently in the plan than what we had before. So I will tell you, one of the comments from the SHPO office was that we invite the other Indigenous nations to write some of this section. So that will be something that we want to do outreach to. It will take a while, we know that, but it's something that that was a great comment. So we'll pursue that. I think that was probably one of the biggest things that was brought up in their comments. And so that's a good idea. It's great, actually. I think we'll add a lot to this. And jump in anytime, interrupt me anytime, but I did want to point out the goals and policies then.
Before you also, I just wanted to mention on dark skies.
Yeah.
Please, on the dark skies, one of the things there is you mentioned observatories and all of those as being kind of like, beneficiary of a lot of the dark sky work and all that. It is very broad, the ripple effect of dark skies, tourism, all kinds of other things that aren't listed here. And I know that one time I went to the county, for permanent summer there, and I heard somebody ask, well, it was Lowell, consultant. You don't need to ask Lowell Observatory about it with dark skies. I mean, it felt weird. It was like, well, because it's Lowell Observatory here, they're the ones who enjoy the dark sky. I was kind of just going, what? It's just like, why would I consult Lowell Observatory? We want dark skies. So, I mean, it was kind of weird to like be put almost like, well, we got to ask Lowell if this is a good project. I'm like, wait a minute, you don't have to ask Lowell. I mean, we want dark skies. So anyway, the point is to highlight it that way. There is a real value broader than just the observatories in Coconino County for dark skies that it might not be articulated quite thoroughly here, and also the ripple effect economically, whether it's tourism or other different home values. I mean, people move in Flagstaff because they can see the sun. All these other things that far exceed just the pure benefits to Lowell and everywhere else, not even public, right? Fair enough, but it's like we gotta have dark skies, so Terrell has dark skies. That doesn't make me feel any better about it. So, but if you say, hey, you know what, they do really embrace dark skies, how do we support you?
Melissa?
Hi.
Hi, it's Rose. I'd like to go ahead and say something about dark skies as well. I know that I noticed, and I still have to read the rest of most of this and comment back on it. However, in the first paragraph, there's information regarding incorporated myths and legends. I think for our indigenous people, it's important to stay away from that word myths, because that's really pretty much steeped in false beliefs, and that is not what we are about. So I think it's really important to maybe incorporate like lifeway stories, and legends is okay, but that word myths is something that's very misleading. Then the other thing is I think that all words that say indigenous need to also be capitalized. And that's what I have right now, but I still have to go through pretty much the latter half of this document. Thank you. And I do agree with somebody who said that there's a wider range of to look at dark skies. There's that ripple effect. There's other things that need to be incorporated as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then we'll just jump through the policies real quick, the goals and policies. And then, first policy to develop well-designed goal is develop well-designed communities that promote unique multicultural and resilient character. I can just go through these. And then, if you all have anything to stop me, goal 2, preserve defining environmental characteristics of the county, such as natural quiet, dark skies, and scenic view sheds. And then the policy 111, encourage and facilitate opportunities for communities to gather, communicate, and work towards common goals. This is something that was new based on what we heard about our different communities wanting to connect.
Let me go back for a second to goal 2, the dark skies discussion and so forth. I'm remembering that a number of years ago, again, largely driven by Lowell and other economic, astronomical industry discussions, there was the whole statewide thing about digital signage. And I'm trying to remember what the eventual outcome of that, but these billboards down in Phoenix that make you feel like you're in Las Vegas. And there was this proposal, that they could be statewide. No, they can only be in certain counties and they can only be in certain places. So I just wondered if that is still considered a policy issue of concern where the county would like to be tracking digital signage as a trend in the state.
Well, I can speak to our current ordinance in regard to off-premise sign in our lighting code. So our lighting code is very specific about, and any kind of commercial, and it actually does apply to residential. Any kind of commercial signage has to be a very dark sky oriented lighting code. And the city and the county have adopted the identical code, so the county code is applicable countywide. That's one thing, and so a digital sign like that wouldn't be permitted under that.
Well, there's also,
And then we don't allow on-premise signs, so billboards are a whole nother discussion.
like reader boards, for example, are not allowed unless, and they can only change like every 24 hours or something. So that effectively eliminates those digital types.
Right, I'm just saying, I remember that being a huge policy and state discussion. And so some reference about continuing to track trends and maintain
Okay,
that element
I
of
see.
the lighting codes.
Yeah.
That would prevent these things from creeping up.
Okay.
And this is a tough one for all of us, but there is one of these signs right east of here, Twin Arrows. And I mean, and so everybody around there would have to comply.
That's on reservation land.
Well, fair enough, but
That's the reason.
But we'll bring that up as being a value for all of those folks and everything else. And we just read Dark Skies and all that, right? So it's a bit confusing sometimes for all of us.
It is, it's just that we don't have any jurisdiction over that, so we can really can't affect that.
Well, you know, it's just to say, it is a big deal, it is in your codes. It should be mentioned as something that you want to keep in your codes, perhaps.
As a policy is what you're suggesting,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
We do not see any push to change
No,
that.
it's been in place, the billboards have been driven
But I
for
just
40
think-
years or something.
I remember 10 years ago, sitting in this equivalent group, and we were discussing this because it was a big statewide
Right.
thing. And the guy from Navajo Economic Development said, oh, I never heard that the county had a lighting code. And therefore they have their digital billboards. So anyway, if you don't have it somewhere in writing, no one will be reminded that it exists. So this is your place, it seems like.
You're right, those digital boards could be almost same boards. And then would they be, yeah, I can't think about it, but like, do you drive in videos?
Okay,
Could you, we have diversity, equity, and inclusion in here. Could you define that, those terms?
diversity, equity, inclusion, that is, those are often used together to promote the idea that we want to recognize all groups. We want to recognize all cultures, we want to recognize all ethnicities in our decision making. And in our, not just our decision making, but in our work. And I mean, from a work perspective, and, you know, that we collaborate with and making sure that we consult with different groups to bring their perspective into the decision making. Because that's something that, you know, a lot of times groups have been left out or even intentionally excluded from public processes. And this is an attempt to make sure that everybody is included in the public process. To the
That's
degree that.
diversity part. The
And-
diversity part is the discussionary part. You see, this is, these three terms, they're related to, critical race theory. They're descended from critical race theory. Critical theory was introduced by Karl Marx in 1843 to bring this concept to people who did not understand these concepts because they were new, more specific. And so this is basically, the diversity part is the part where they bring more or less it's the initial discussion phase of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Equity doesn't mean equality. Diversity doesn't mean diversity. It means that it sounds good. It sounds like it's going to be diversity, like we would think diversity is, but it's really not. This is the initial phase of bringing people into the concept of equity and inclusion. Equity is actually a rebranding of the word socialism. And inclusion is not really inclusion, it's exclusion. The socially marginalized groups that are supposed to be included in the inclusion part of this, as long as you agree with that concept, that you need to include the socially marginalized groups, then you're okay. But if you disagree with that, the exclusion part comes around. That's kind of like the authoritative role, and that is why folks who are speaking at places like Berkeley that are conservative are shouted down and not allowed to speak. That's the inclusion part, which is exclusion. So I disagree with you using those terms, although it would be the same as critical theory, which if I were, I know you don't agree with me, but I'm just voicing my opinion. And it's not my opinion, because if you take this thing right here and you look up diversity, equity, and inclusion, you'll find out what I'm telling you. It's true, because that's where I got it.
If I could speak from a planning point of view, because that's where we're coming from, planners, our first responsibility is to the public. And so that's where we're looking at being inclusive and trying to bring as many groups as we can to the table, so we have the diverse perspective. That's what you all represent, is a diverse group, of our community members. And so to keep it as, I guess, basic as possible, we're really trying to make sure that our responsibility is to the public and bring people in. So the diversity, equity, inclusion is a theme that the county has embraced in terms of our, we've had some trainings on it, and it's something that the county is wanting to, the history that you brought up, and that would be maybe a separate discussion that we could have if there's something more to learn about that. But just from a very basic point of view, that's where we're coming from.
But use the word you just said. Don't use diversity, equity, and inclusion. Just the word you just said is what you should use. Those are very straightforward, and everybody understands it.
Hi, this is Rose. I believe in equity, diversity, equity, inclusion. I think it's really important for our area. And I think it's very important for those, for our people and for people of different, color, especially. So, and I think that everybody is included in that, not just what we call, quote, minorities. But I think it's all people, and we have to begin somewhere to be inclusive, to have equitable types of spaces, and to have people feel at home and not be afraid to go somewhere, to be included that way, in that good kinship way. So I think these words are very powerful and very important. Yeah.
I appreciate Rose's concept, but Rose has been taught that we're all victims of this critical theory stuff. We have been, because it's been taught to us since 1915. I can appreciate that, but I think we're bending to political correctness. That's my problem.
Well, Billy, I'll put it back to the group, the advisory group is, in terms of how we want to move forward with this. Using these terms, because it's something that, as staff, I certainly would encourage that we keep that in here, but it's, as an advisory, we want to hear from all of you too. It's an important topic to describe a way where we are inclusive of all groups. And as Rose said, that people feel comfortable and safe and that this plan is addressing the needs of our diverse community.
I don't have a problem with the word equality, but equity and equality are two different things.
So I've worked with DEI in university settings, and I'm familiar with people who've come in with the background that you're describing. I've had a very different introduction to the history and the use of these terms and, what is critical race theory? Actually, the terms were used much more recently than Marx.
Yes.
And, universities have struggled to figure out how to address equity and not just bringing people on the campus, but actually trying to ensure that people have roughly equivalent opportunities to access resources. So I personally don't have a problem with these terms, and I'm interested in Rose's reaction that they remain powerful, meaningful terms to people, so that seems a plus. It also seems to me, from what you've said, Melissa, that this is part of county policy, and perhaps citing it as such, Coconino County supports, this phrase and what it means in the planning context. Like you say, you could explain in the planning context, this means bringing people in for consultation, for mutual respect, acceptance, values, equal opportunity, as equal as possible, opportunities to participate in planning and so forth. So there might be some way of keeping the terms, but making clear what you're meaning in the planning context that might avoid some of the worries that people have developed. It's true, people have developed a lot of worries about the use of these terms.
Critical theory was brought on in by Karl Marx, 1843. Critical race theory was first used by Angela Davis of University of Southern California, Berkeley. But it was popularized by another guy. His name was Reading. I can't remember now. But anyway, he got the credit for critical race theory. But it was actually Angela Davis that began using critical theory with race in the 60s.
Do you think that what Laura's suggesting, if we maybe explain it a bit more, that would be appropriate then? So that it is put in context of this plan in this county and what we're trying to do here.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just have a question. I'm trying to understand it in the planning aspect. You say plan walks in the door and they say, this is what we need to say. Okay, if we don't say it, what does it mean to the county, to you guys? What does it mean? Does it mean forest islands can put in a gated community? I don't know, just throw that out. I don't know how that applies to the county going through their planning process. And, you know, entitlement
Right,
process,
that's-
I don't understand. I think they say it's irrelevant. I guess it's relevant to add a lot more, but is that relevant to what we're talking about? And if it is, how is it relevant?
The planning process, this is part of the planning process. This is an open process. Our public hearings are open to the public for use permits and that kind of thing. That's what we're referring to when we say the planning process. You know, we're bringing in the gated community, you know, that's not what we're talking about here because, you know, that's private property. If, you know, subdivision wants to be gated, then that's something that is not necessarily a good thing, but, you know, for certain reasons, but it's not something that this would necessarily address, but for the county and for policies going forward, because if you look at the policies that we've written here, particularly this one right here, number 6, ensure fairness and equity in providing for housing, services, health, safety, and livelihood of all citizens and groups across Coconino County. That's an idea, you know, across all departments that we try to make sure that services are available countywide. So it really does apply to what the county offers by way of, you know, trying to make these things accessible. And, you know, when we look at the other goals, this goal number 5, impacts to sovereign indigenous nations and all people are considered land use decisions. That's pretty specific to land use decisions. And there's some ideas on how to do outreach, how to connect with specific groups that otherwise may not know about the project, may not feel comfortable coming forward and talking about something, wanting to know if a project is culturally appropriate. These are the kinds of ideas where we're trying to expand our tools and our mechanisms for reaching people.
Let's say it that way. Let's call it cultural appropriateness. Let's call it what it is. Instead of using the buzzwords that may not even mean the same thing 10 years from now.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to look through this and see where those 3 words are used, because I don't think it's used that often throughout this document. But these goals are really, you know, what are looked at during the land use decision, and you know, if they're specific enough or not appropriate, then that would be good to hear. But we can look through that and find places where we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and maybe expand on what that actually means to the county.
If you could define the words, define the meaning of the words, define the concept, define it instead of using the buzzwords.
Got
I
it.
think that's the problem I have.
I see. Got it.
Melissa,
The buzzwords.
hi, Melissa.
Yeah, go ahead. And then, yeah.
I think this requires more discussion and more time instead of just kind of rushing through it. I have to leave right now, and I also believe that there's 2 public people who want to make public comments, and I don't know if we're out of time, but I have to leave.
Thanks, Rose.
Thanks, Rosie.
Well, the buzzwords are for our up and coming generation to understand those. Our young adults who are going to be our future, they understand those buzzwords. They're kind of new and I'm older and they're a little hard for me to digest, but I have a couple recent grandchildren who are college graduates and that's their work. This type of buzzwords and so I would support using them and maybe the words you use, they're today's words. But explanation, as Jim suggested, just add to that a little bit, but I see where these words are every day in our young adults' language and understanding.
Thanks. Do you want to move on to the So what we can do on this, then, we'll bring these back, these edits back, and then we need to go through and the SHPO comments and bring it all back to you. I think we'll probably need to look at the schedule and email you about that. The next meeting is November 25th. It's a Monday. Because we shifted from Thursday to Monday. And we've got a couple chapters, then planned, big chapters, land use and transportation. But, we'll have to do some emails and see how you want to maybe adjust the schedule so we're not so short on time. But then there's public comment. I think maybe
let's
one
do
big
that.
comment.
Let's go ahead and do some public comment.
You want to say it a little bit louder, maybe?
That's, if there's anybody, is there any public comment?
We had two people chat, saying that they wanted to comment, so I believe, Amy B said Amy would like to make a comment, and Jason, Kordowski. So those are the only two, who in the chat who identified as like to make a comment.
Jason, would you like to visit with us?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Group members. I do know that Amy had to go, just so you know, but she submitted her public comment online, so you should receive that. But anyways, my name is Jason Kordowski, and I've lived in Coconino County for over 8 years. I'm here tonight as both a resident and as the regional field organizer for the Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance to encourage you to include a study of community choice energy in the county's comprehensive plan, specifically as it relates to the greater Flagstaff area. Community choice energy or community choice aggregation is a utility model that allows local governments to purchase power for their residents, businesses, and public entities from the open market, while the current utility provider, APS, maintains transmission and infrastructure. By aggregating demand, communities gain leverage to negotiate better rates and choose greener local power sources such as Perrin Ranch, Babbitt Ranch, and Chevelon Butte. Some of you may be aware that the Arizona legislature would need to pass what's called enabling legislation for community choice energy to be an option for local governments. Some think it's better to wait to study this model until after legislation is passed. I think quite the opposite. We should be prepared to implement community choice energy when the legislation is passed. Coconino County has a wonderful opportunity to develop a study through a no-cost program. Through the DOE's National Renewable Energy Laboratory, this study would prepare the county's greater Flagstaff area to transition to community choice energy when legislation passes, lowering its residents' energy costs and accelerating the switch to green energy. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Jason. And Jason, just to,
I'm here.
oh, you're, and you incorporated Amy's comments as well?
It is. Amy had a little different version, but yeah, it's largely the same thing. Amy was also going to ask for a study of PCE. The idea behind this is that there is a no-cost program right now where as long as you have someone at the county who could afford the time to work on this, you could get it done. So
Super. Thank you, Jason.
thanks.
Is there any other public comment? So there is a bunch of that. Okay. Well, hey, look, this one's super busy for everybody, and thank you for that because I thought it was substantive in this game. Thank you for all what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
It's very, yeah, I just thought it was super hard. See you guys next time.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.
And we'll stop recording.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Well, I don't know why you put it. Well, I'm not sure.
Your reaction.
It's like some people heard it was review and others
I
just.
think it was maybe their audience. I don't know. Well,
Mhm.
thank you, everybody, we're done.
You guys live in so different.
Oh, you want me to-
Yeah.